Hi, my name is Katie O'Brien, and I am an admissions counselor I'm an associate director at Seattle University, and I am here to talk to Washington State DECA students a little bit about the college admissions process. Let's see here. I'm just going to confirm that this is working since we've had some fun technical difficulties. One second here. Alrighty. Thank you for your patience for everyone watching, and for those of you who are tuning in afterwards. There's a lovely basement scene behind me, so thanks so much for joining me. And today I'm going to talk just a little bit about just the process. So a number of things with the process of applying to college admissions. This is my 8th year in admissions, and I am happy to share some of my experience that I learned through this process and some of the tips and tricks that I think would be helpful to students. So first off, we're going to talk briefly about kind of finding the right fit for a college and what to look for in terms of just that piece. I'm going to talk a little bit about the admissions cycle starting in junior year. So those of you who are seniors, there's no right or wrong way to go around it, but this way, if there's any kind of rising students who are sophomores or juniors, you can know what to expect. I'm going to talk about a bit about the holistic review process and kind of how to highlight your strengths and all that you do kind of inside the classroom as well as outside the classroom, and also how you can really brand yourself with those strengths. First off, just to help you understand, I'm going to speak from my context of an associate director and my experience at admissions at Seattle University, which is kind of on the large side of small schools. We're about 4,700 undergraduates and around 7,400 total students if you include our law school and our grad programs. That's my experience. However, I have colleagues at many colleges and universities throughout Washington, throughout the country, and I know that a lot of the tips that I'm going to give you are going to be helpful regardless of whether you're applying to schools like Seattle U or very, very different institutions. Now, I'm a very firm believer that there is no one perfect college for anyone. So you could be happy at a number of different colleges. The most important thing is that you find that spot at your school, that your kind of niche, your community. But there are going to be schools that are going to be better fit based on your individual characteristics. So I think it's really helpful to start with those big categories and then kind of narrow things down. Things like location. Are you going to be cool being really far from home and knowing that you might not be able to come home for Thanksgiving? So if you're here in Washington, do you want to look East Coast because that's exciting and new and a way to experience something different? Or do you want to make sure that you're able to get home once a month? So those are some factors to consider. Additionally, size is a really good way to kind of narrow down your list of colleges. Are you wanting to go to a school that has a really large population? University of Washington, fantastic school, has over 40,000 students. So it's going to be much different than, say, if you're going to a smaller institution like Seattle U, where the average class size is 19 and you're going to get to know your professors a little different. Both are fantastic options, and students just thrive in different different ways. Also, setting like Seattle U, we're right in the heart of the city, which is not what everybody wants. Some students love it. Some would rather go to college kind of in the middle of a cornfield where the college is kind of the main thing that's going on. So those are all fantastic options. It's just doing that reflection work to see what is going to be the best fit. I think I really encourage students to get started early in building their list so that you can do your homework before you apply. I talk to a lot of students who apply to upwards of 15 schools, more than that, and that can be really stressful. Not only is that a lot of application fees, it's pretty expensive, but also it makes the spring of your senior year pretty challenging. And in terms of maybe if you apply to 18 schools, you're admitted to 12 of them, now you have to go back and research those 12 schools and compare 12 financial aid packages, and that's just really hard. So I think the magic number is anywhere from 4 to 7. That way you've got a little bit of a range of schools. You've got kind of maybe a safety school, a school that's a reach, some schools that you may get some financial aid at, and that way it can make life a little easier for you. To talk a little bit about the timeline, the admissions cycle timeline. I'm going to start again junior year. Seniors, don't worry if you haven't done these things. There's still time to catch up, but this is maybe just an ideal situation. So fall in your junior year, people talk a lot about how junior year is pretty important academically, and I'm not going to change that opinion. When you're applying to Seattle U, especially, or any colleges, especially if you're applying for early deadlines, your junior year, those are going to be the last grades that we see prior to making a decision. We will see those senior year grades, so it's important to make sure that you are still doing great in senior year, but junior year is a time to really challenge yourself appropriately. For some students, appropriate challenge is a full AP schedule, or taking more than the required, years of language or something like that. For other students, it's maybe one AP or one honors class. So talk with your high school counselor, talk with your parents to really make sure you understand what that challenge level is for you. Fall and winter of your junior year are really great times to be thinking about going to college fairs and starting to visit colleges. In Seattle, or in the Washington area, there are national college fairs where hundreds of colleges come, and those are great ways to just pick up brochures and start doing some of that reading material. Many colleges will host preview days when in fall or winter of your junior year. You can just kind of go check them out. Spring of your junior year is a great time to take the SAT or ACT so that you have those scores available if you want to apply to colleges early in the fall. And then you have time to maybe take the exam. I know how fun it is to do standardized testing, but you can take the exam more than once. And that first time you get those jitters out, and then the second time you can really concentrate on improving your scores. And then over the summer, you can start brainstorming essay ideas, and you can think about what teachers are really going to be able to write you fantastic recommendation letters. Senior year, fall, I totally recommend that you make a calendar of kind of when the different deadlines are. And I'm a big proponent of taking a deadline, say Seattle University, our November 15th early action deadline, and setting your deadline to be at least a week in advance of that. So say November 8th is the date that you're planning to get everything in, because you never know, as we experienced tonight, there can be technical difficulties. There can just be challenges. Maybe something happened in your registrar's office at school and they didn't send you a transcript on time. So making sure that you're really hitting those deadlines is pretty important. We do our best. We really want to help students. We don't want to make it a challenging process, but sometimes if we don't get your materials on time, we may or may not be able to consider your application. So keep that in mind as well. And then you might want to think about retaking the SAT or ACT in the fall, making sure you're aware of those early deadlines and especially scholarship deadlines. Seattle University has a scholarship called the Sullivan Leadership Award, which I know many DECA students are very involved, not just in DECA, but lots of different leadership opportunities. And our Sullivan Leadership Award is a 4-year full tuition room and board scholarship. It's given to 9 incoming freshmen, so it's pretty competitive, but it's a great way to learn about the leadership opportunities available at Seattle U. So I know I'm plugging Seattle U stuff, but you can definitely find those kinds of opportunities at many different colleges, and knowing those deadlines early is going to be important for you. Making sure you're visiting colleges again in senior year. In the winter time, you can file the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, so that you can be considered, again, not just for maybe federal or state aid programs, but also many colleges, especially private universities, offer their own need-based grants. At Seattle University last year, 93% of our freshmen received financial aid, usually either in the form of a merit scholarship or a need-based grant, or usually it's a combination of the two. And you can only be considered for those need-based grants if you file the FAFSA. So that's where it's pretty important to think of that deadline. In the springtime, you're going to start getting your decisions back. You're going to start being able to compare those financial aid packages and really understand, we talk about fit. Financial fit is a really important part of the equation. So you can do that. There's also a lot of spring visit days, so you can get that one last visit in. sometimes you look at a college a little bit differently once you've been admitted also. And then a date that many seniors will hear, or even if you're a junior, over and over is May 1st. And that is the National Candidate Reply Deadline. That's the date that most four-year institutions are going to want to know when you, or where you're going to apply. It's pretty important that you only submit your confirmation deposit at one university. Sometimes students are like, well, I still haven't made up my decision. So I will tell two different schools that I am going to confirm. But what we do when we kind of get those confirmations from students who say, yes, I'm coming, we start looking at our numbers and we decide whether or not we're going to take students off of our wait list. So if you are sending a deposit to a school that you're not actually ultimately going to attend, you may be taking a spot from another student. So make sure you're just submitting that one confirmation deposit at one college. And so now that we've talked a little bit about kind of the application timeline, we can talk a little bit about what we're looking for. What college look? There's all these myths out there about what college admissions counselors look at and what we want you to have on your resume or in terms of your GPA and your test scores. And so one thing to keep in mind is GPA and test scores are one part of the equation, but that only tells me so much about you as a student. And those numbers don't tell me anything about what a wonderful person you are. And so as cheesy as that sounds, we are trying to understand on one hand, we want to make sure you're going to be able to excel in our rigorous classes at Seattle University. And so that's something we draw out of your application. On the other hand, we're also trying to see who you're going to be on our campus and what you're going to kind of add to our campus and not just in the classroom, but outside the classroom as well. So in addition to those GPA and test scores, another thing we consider is grade trend. Your more recent grades are the most important to us because those are most indicative of how you're going to perform in college. So sometimes the students maybe starts off not so hot in high school, but since then their grades kind of go on the rise. That really changes the way I see that overall GPA. Likewise, if someone starts off really strong and then their grades dive down, that's not going to be a very strong grade trend. In addition to grade 10, we're looking at academic rigor. We really want to make sure that, again, that students are appropriately challenging themselves. So thinking about the ways that, again, you can go above and beyond certain requirements because that's not only going to help you maybe impress a college, but that's when you're challenging yourself, you're only going to find more challenge in college. It's not going to go away. And so being able to experience some of that and show colleges that you have been challenging yourself, that just shows us that you will be successful once you come to our campuses. We are definitely looking at so the type of courses that you're taking as well as the school that you attend. We are looking at your outside activities. So if you're really involved in, say, I don't know, DECA, that's something you would certainly want to highlight. And it doesn't have to be any one thing. So some students are really passionate about leadership. I think there's a myth out there that you have to have 1 million hours of community service to get into college. And we love to see students who have dedicated themselves to their communities, especially at Seattle U, where 4 out of 5 students will do service while they're here. So that's something that we love to see. But we want to see really whatever that means to you as far as outside of the classroom experience. We're looking for students who have shown a commitment to their communities. If you have a part-time job, if you're really involved in athletics, if you have a hobby that you are really passionate about, all of those things are things that colleges want to know about. So make sure that when you're filling out your application, you're finding ways to highlight those pieces. Additionally, something I really recommend to students is if there are any inconsistencies in your transcript, it's pretty important that you point those out. Sometimes a student maybe, for instance, grade trend, they were doing great freshman year, grades dipped down sophomore year, and then they came back up and they did great the rest of the time in high school. Sometimes students are like, well, I don't want to draw attention to that, so I'm not going to say anything about it. But really what happens is if I read that transcript, the only thing, if there's no other explanation, the only thing I'm going to assume is, well, I guess the student just kind of slacked off in their sophomore year. And I would say 9 times out of 10, that is not the case. There's usually something else that was happening, maybe grandpa died and the student was really close to their grandfather and it really affected them, or they were going through some other kind of hardship. So giving us the context to that information can be really, really helpful. You don't want to make excuses. I definitely don't want to hear that my teacher didn't like me or something like that as an excuse for not performing, like getting an A in a class or something. If that was the case, that teacher didn't like you, there are ways to kind of professionally address the issue, or things that make you come off just really responsible and mature. And we love to see students who are like, hey, I recognize that this is a weakness I have. This is how I solved it. So addressing any inconsistencies in your application is pretty important. In your essays, I love reading essays. I think I calculated the other day, I have read over 10,000 college admissions essays. And so I really, that's my favorite part, to kind of get a nice little, just small piece of who you are as a person. And so one thing that I recommend with essays, definitely having sincerity and authenticity in your essays. You don't need to write about what you think I want to hear. I want you to write about what's important to you. So there are a lot of times when I'm reading an essay and I can tell a student wrote about a service project that they did only because they heard somewhere that college admissions counselors love to read about service projects. And if the service project was something that was completely life-changing to you and was really important to you, then I totally want to hear about it. But if you're writing about it just because that's what you think I want to read, I would much, much rather hear about your love of reality TV or something that is just a little truer to who you are, because that's going to it's going to come off as more sincere. I also recommend that students provide specific examples in their essays. It can be really easy to write, for instance, a tribute essay to your mom, and it's like, oh, my mom is really kind, she's really great. I want to know, how is she kind? How is she great? Give me specific examples, because those really liven up your essays. My favorite example of this is a student who was talking about her study abroad trip that she took to Australia, and she really wanted to jump in and to experience a different culture. And the first day that she got there, her host mom served her kangaroo for dinner, and her heart sank. All she could envision was this cute little fluffy kangaroo, and she didn't really want to eat the kangaroo, but she just decided, hey, I told myself I was going to challenge myself and jump into a new culture, and so she did it. And so that was a really fun way to take this larger idea of embracing a new culture and giving me a specific story with it. And this probably goes without saying, but strong grammar and spelling are very, very important. Do not submit your college essays without having someone else read them, because there's a way, when someone else is looking at your essay, they're going to see it in a different light. They're going to be able to say, yes, this is definitely you, or you might want to change this part. With the spelling piece, spell check doesn't catch everything, so reading things aloud or having someone else read them are important. If you were talking, for instance, about your volunteer work as a candy striper, if you add one extra P into the phrase candy striper, it completely changes the meaning. And I would really recommend that. That's why you need to have someone else take a look, so that you can avoid those errors. Seattle University were on the Common application, and I read a fantastic essay last year that was I was reading it, I was like, this is so great. And then all of a sudden I got to the end, and the last sentence was, and that is why I want to attend the University of Washington. Again, no offense to University of Washington, but that student, I think, didn't take the time, either when they were uploading their essay or editing, to realize, okay, I probably shouldn't tell Seattle University how much I want to go to this other school. So think about those kind of things when you're editing your essays and having other people check them out. And I was also asked, another thing I would really, really encourage students, regardless of what stage you're in terms of the application process, you should consider every interaction that you have with a college as part of your college application. So if you are on a tour, you should be really respectful and think of really great questions to ask the tour guide. If you are emailing an admissions counselor, you should think about, okay, how can I email in kind of a professional manner? It doesn't have to be like really, really formal, but I had a student email me a couple weeks ago, and it just said, hi, I want to know about my application. no punctuation, no capital letters, no name. So I had no idea how to look this student up. And that doesn't mean that that student's not going to be admitted, but right off the bat, I just didn't have a very good impression of that student. A better way is to say, hi, Katie, my name is so-and-so. I was just wondering if you could check on the status of my application. I submitted it this time. Thank you very much, sincerely. It doesn't take a lot of work, but those are things to really think about, because with this holistic application, all of your interactions are things that we consider. So that's something that, and also seeking out admissions counselors to do either phone interviews or to just do informational interviews. That's going to help you, because it can really help you make sure you're applying to colleges that are going to be the right fit, but then also to think about the impression that you're making. So when I meet with a student or I talk to a student on the phone and I can say, oh, that student just made such a great impression, and I get their application later, I can remember that kind of great first impression I had. Another thing I was asked to talk about is how to really brand yourself to colleges. And so I think first and foremost, involvement in DECA is a great thing to highlight in your application or when you're talking to colleges, and really know how you can emphasize those transferable skills with the colleges. So what are the things that you're learning in DECA? Are you learning leadership skills, organizational skills, and just ways that you can present yourself professionally? Those are all things that are going to be helpful in college and then afterwards when you graduate to get a great job. I think that when you are thinking about things in high school, again, it doesn't matter where you are in the process, but I really recommend that students, that you don't just take classes for the sake of going to college, or you don't just get involved in certain things only for the sake of going to college, but rather that you get involved in things that are important to you and that are going to enrich your life. Because naturally, that is going to be impressive to me if I find out that you formed a knitting club at school and organized all this stuff. You know, that might not seem college, I guess, something that you would put all together to tell a college, but that's interesting to me, and that helps me understand a little bit about who you are, and that helps you know yourself too, and what's important to you. So regardless if it's knitting or really anything else, doing things for the sake of your love of learning or for just what is interesting to you is going to enrich your life. And actually, even if you're not trying to make it so that you're more competitive to college that way, it's going to come off that way. So that's something that's pretty important. And mostly I think it's just really important that you enjoy and challenge yourself in high school. And challenge doesn't necessarily just mean academically. It could mean going out of your comfort zone and trying something new. College is all going to be new, regardless, even if you're going to the college that's just right down the road, it's going to be new experiences and you're going to meet new people. So the more chances that you have to do that while you are in high school, the more prepared you're going to be afterwards. So those are some of the ways that you can really brand yourself. We're in the Common application, and so students can have a page where they can list all the things that they're involved in and how many weeks a year and things that takes up. There's also part of the application called additional information. So let's say you wrote your essay about, you know, regardless of what you wrote your essay about, if there's part of the application you're like, I just haven't been able to share this very important thing with me about a college or about myself with a college, and that's what I want to talk about, there's a part of the application called additional information. So when talking about branding yourself, if there's anything that you want to tell us that isn't included elsewhere in your application, that additional information section is important, or is a great spot to do so. That's also where you could address any kind of inconsistencies in your application, as I mentioned earlier. And then my final piece of admissions my final piece of advice for college admissions is really to connect with the admissions offices where you are applying. At Seattle University, we read applications by territory. So I am the admissions counselor for students kind of in the east side of Seattle. So Bellevue, Issaquah, Kirkland kind of area, Sammamish. And then I also read applications from Utah. I don't know if there's anyone listening from Utah here, and also Spokane, which, so I love it when students reach out to me and I can get to know them. Likewise, students, our admissions counselors for other regions will visit high schools, we'll do coffee shop interviews, and it's a great resource for you because you can kind of consider, if I'm your admissions counselor, you can consider me your go-to person in the admissions office. So if you have a question, you don't have to call the main line and get transferred all over the place and explain yourself over and over. You could call me and say, hey, Katie, it's the student that talked to you at the college fair, and I emailed you last week asking about my transcript, and I can say, oh yeah, it's nice to talk to you again. So building that relationship is important. That might not always be the case at maybe some larger institutions, but I know many of my colleagues at lots of different colleges throughout Washington and the West Coast will have similar advice, is to get in touch with their offices and ask questions early and often. That's what we're here for. We're looking for reasons to admit you and bring you fabulous people to our campuses. So you don't have to think of us as like scary sort of gatekeepers with a big like reject stamp. That's not who we are. We want to help you get to college, whether it's, you know, my college or some other university. We want to help you figure out what is going to be the best next step for you. Also, this maybe sounds kind of cheesy, but I would recommend for the colleges where you're applying to follow them on social media, on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter or what have you, so that you can see what's happening on campus, or if there are deadlines or things that you want to be aware of. I know you get a million emails a day, especially because I'm sometimes the person sending them, so I apologize, but and those can be easy to miss. So sometimes just keeping track of, if you're just checking Facebook and you see that University of Portland is having a preview day, you can find out things that way as well. And I guess I'm just going to kind of emphasize that starting early and making sure that you're hitting those deadlines, as obvious as that maybe sounds, is pretty important, especially for things like scholarship deadlines and stuff like that. There are so many great opportunities, not necessarily through the colleges, but outside scholarships that you can look at. A website I know is super popular, fastweb.com. So FASTWEB.com. That's a scholarship engine, and it's a great way for you to learn about. There's scholarships for everything. There's scholarships for people who are tall, people who are short. There's scholarship for people who make prom dresses out of duct tape. So those are things that you can think about and really start in your senior year, because not all of those scholarships are going to be full rides, but if you get 10 $500 scholarships, then that's really going to help out. So getting started on that is great. So that kind of concludes most of the tips that I have for you today. I am happy if you have questions. You can email me. My email address is B as in boy, RIENK @seattleu.edu. That's O'BrienK@seattleu.edu. And you can also, if you just go to the Seattle U website, seattleu.edu, and search for admissions or for Katie O'Brien, my contact information will come up there as well. I wish you all the best of luck in your college search. Just take it one step at a time. I know it can be kind of overwhelming, but we're here to help, and we're here to make sure that you're successful in the steps that you take after high school. So best wishes and all of that, and definitely contact me if you have additional questions. Thank you. Good night.